And on behalf of the Active Transportation Resource Center, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to the latest installment of our teleconference series. For 2021, we have branded our teleconference series Synergy 2021 as a statement of our vision that coming together and sharing our work, through coming together and sharing our work, we can provide a greater impact than our separate efforts can do alone. And as the slide indicates, our theme today is equity. So as part of today's teleconference, we will have multiple presentations that demonstrate equitable engagement practice in active transportation as well as in public health, and with regards to planning and project development. Our featured speakers include representatives from the California Department of Health, Public Health's Office of Health Equity, Caltrans District 2 Active Transportation Team and Native American Liaison Branch, the Tuolumne River Trust, and also Fresno County Department of Public Health. Each presenter will speak to their equity and local community engagement efforts, as well as lessons learned from their current partnerships and collaborations that advance safety and health for communities that have been historically marginalized. Next slide, please. Okay, so before we jump into our presentation, I need to review a few logistics. We ask that everyone who is not speaking be in listen-only mode, to keep the phone lines and to keep your phone lines muted so that we can minimize background noise. If you have questions during the teleconference, please use the chat feature and please chat to all attendees. Our format is slightly different in that we will break for questions after each speaker today. So we really encourage you to ask questions in the chat throughout the presentation so that we can ask them at the end of every presentation. Please note that the teleconference is being recorded, and slides and all materials discussed today will be posted to the Active Transportation Resource Center website, and we'll send out information when that is ready to go. And then finally, we ask that all attendees complete a post-teleconference survey. It really gives us great feedback as to how we did and what other types of topics we can introduce as in future teleconferences. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right. So just as a reminder for anyone who's joining the Active Transportation Resource Center for the first time today, our work is focused on increasing safe walking and rolling for all ages and abilities through technical assistance, training, and resources that support California's Active Transportation Program. But our team has also found that it's really beneficial for us to reiterate in these teleconference and webinar series our motivations and what keeps us going. So we're here to help California meet its long-term multimodal transportation, sustainability, health, safety, and equity goals. We're here to build your awareness, confidence, and trust in the Active Transportation Resource Center, as well as your understanding of the complex active transportation project requirements. We are here to assist you in making your active transportation project as successful as possible. And finally, we share in the same goals and vision that we want to get more people safely walking and bicycling for transportation. Next slide, please. Okay, this webinar is co-hosted by Caltrans as well as the California Department of Public Health. And today we're happy to have Summer Lopez, who is the Assistant Coordinator for the Active Transportation Program, non-infrastructure programs in the Active Transportation Resource Center. So thank you, Summer, for joining us today. I mentioned that my name is Victoria Custodio. I'm part of the Active Transportation Resource Center Non-Infrastructure Technical Assistance Team, and I'm pleased to introduce Marianne Hernandez, who is also who's doing really all of the work behind the scenes for today's teleconference to make sure that it happens and goes smoothly. So thank you so much to Marianne and Summer for joining us. Next slide, please. Okay. And with all of that said, let's get to our featured speakers. I want to thank them all for taking the time today to share their knowledge and effort and framing to advance our dialogue and the state's focus on equity and equitable engagement. Just so everyone is aware on this call, these are our speakers, and before each presentation, I plan to share a brief bio of the speaker. before their turn, and then I will turn it over to the presenter for their presentation. So we have, first off, we have Lázaro Cardenas, who is with the California Department of Public Health, Office of Health Equity. Lázaro is the racial equity specialist at the California Department of Public Health, Office of Health Equity. He coordinates California Department of Public Health's Racial and Health Equity Initiative, and is also supporting equity efforts in the COVID response. And today, and maybe Marianne can bring up his slides as I finish up this introduction. Lázaro is going to speak to community engagement and race equity, and will include discuss a lot of the framing and strategies that are being used here at the California Department of Public Health to advance racial equity and health equity in California. All right, so on that note, Lázaro, can I get a audio check from you? Make sure you're
Yes,
unmuted.
good morning.
Great. All right.
Can you hear me?
Please do. Thank you.
Great. All right, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Lázaro Cardenas. I also go by Lázaro. Won't provide any more background. Thank you, Victoria, for giving me that wonderful intro. I was asked today to kind of provide less of a project-based example of community engagement and equity, but more provide the kind of foundations and principles and theoretical practicum around community engagement and equity, specifically as it relates to my work around racial equity. I will, however, provide a few tidbits of skills and takeaways that I think are very helpful and will set the foundation for the rest of the presenters this morning. So a quick overview of the Office of Health Equity. OHE, as we call it, was established in 2012 under the California Health and Safety Code. OHE provides a key leadership role to reduce health and mental health disparities experienced by vulnerable communities in California and advance health equity among priority populations. We have a very strong emphasis on cross-sectoral partners across state government and local government. We work closely with community-based organizations and local government agencies to ensure that community perspective and input help shape a health equity lens in the policies and strategic plans, recommendations, and various implementation activities. This is a quick overview of our programs. If we do have time later, I can go back to these and field any questions and see if there's anything in particular that you'd be interested in learning about. But I'll just pause real quick, give you a second to look at some of our programs before I move on. And I am, if you're interested, I am housed in the Health and All Policies program. So I believe many of you are familiar with this. This is the Bar High model, or the Bay Area Health and Equities Initiative model. This model was adopted, has been widely adopted by public health departments as a way of understanding and describing what we call upstream structural things like living conditions and institutional and social inequities that ultimately drive individual and community health. Government, and in particular public health, has responded to health inequities by developing programs and services to lessen their effects. These are often traditionally focused downstream, over here around disease and injury and risky behaviors on the right side of the screen. And these are really necessary and are in many instances critical lifelines to the communities that we serve. Yet by focusing downstream, we're not able to improve the underlying and upstream conditions that result in these poor and inequitable outcomes. Recently, there's been a growing movement in public health that, in addition to focusing on downstream factors, we expand and reach and start focusing more upstream. We need to change the underlying systems that create and perpetuate racial and social inequities. And as it relates to the discussion today, most of you know already that the physical environment, including land use, transportation, and more, are all upstream factors which drive health outcomes. It's also important to note that the role of community capacity building and organizing and civic engagement play in driving and informing change between living conditions, and institutional and social inequities. So you see how the blue box around community capacity building and more connects to the orange arrow, right, that leads to institutional inequities and then also leads to social inequities. So that is to say that communities themselves have a foundational role when it comes to advancing health equity from a systems perspective. And as I described earlier, my focus is on racial equity. And to understand racial equity, we must come to a collective understanding of the barriers to racial equity, namely one of them being white supremacy. White supremacy has been around the news more and more over the past year, yet many have not taken the time to stop and think and really consider what we mean when we say white supremacy and what white supremacy is. At CDPH, we have a glossary of terms that helps us understand and communicate as a department about what we mean in terms of various terms, including white supremacy. And so here's our definition that we've developed. White supremacy is a belief in the superiority of white Euro-American cultural heritage, including history, arts, language, traditions, over the cultural heritage and experiences of people of color and Black and Indigenous people. It is a historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of nations and peoples of color by white people for the purposes of maintaining and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. And I'm starting this conversation this early in the morning, really talking about white supremacy because we need to recognize the problem before we can get into the nuts and bolts of the solution. We need to understand what are we trying to fix, right? Many individuals and organizations say we need to combat systemic racism and dismantle white supremacy, but what does that really mean for an organization and what does it mean for the communities we're serving? A related term is white supremacy culture. Culture is powerful precisely because it is so present and at the same time so very difficult to name or identify. These characteristics are all characteristics related to white supremacy culture. And these are damaging to organizations and communities because they're used as norms and standards without being proactively named or chosen by any group, really. They're damaging because they promote white supremacy thinking. They're damaging to both people of color and to white people. We won't get into all of these today, but we will talk about paternalism and as it relates to community engagement and government decision-making. If you want to learn more, check out the book here that this is extrapolated from, The Characteristics of White Supremacy Culture, Dismantling Racism, a Workbook for Social Change. And we'll have the slides recorded to you all so you can access an overview of that book online and all other relevant resources online. But again, turning to paternalism for our discussion today. Rather than define paternalism also, I'm going to describe what it looks like, right? I think it's an easier way to point to it and by a couple of somewhat specific examples. So paternalism is when decision-making is clear to those with power and unclear to those without it. Those with power think they are capable of making decisions for and in the interest of those without power. Those with power often don't think it is important or necessary to understand the viewpoint or experience of those for whom they are making decisions. Those without power understand they do not have it, but understand who does. And those without power do not really know how decisions get made and who makes what decisions, yet they are ultimately completely familiar with the impact of those decisions on them. And a quick side note here, we're going to delve into community engagement, but I want you to think about paternalism in terms of the workplace and your own work experience. Have you ever worked in an organization where you felt like you had no power, and in fact you did not? You likely knew who had the power to make decisions in the workplace, but you did not know how those decisions were made. And in many instances, decisions regarding the workplace or your work conduct were made, but you were not consulted in those decisions. I'm sure we can all recall an experience at a workplace like that. And suffice it to say that those experiences do not feel good. And very quickly, talking about antidotes. So how do we address this? What do we do now, Lazaro, that you broke down these elements of white supremacy and how they are precipitated in organizations and in communities? So a few antidotes that we offer. I like the term antidotes. It's also used in the literature. An antidote is making sure that everyone knows and understands who makes what decisions. Make sure everyone knows and understands their level of responsibility and authority. And include people who are affected by decisions in the decision making. And so now we're really going to start thinking about how to reflect and evaluate where your own organization is in terms of applying these antidotes. And that is where specific tools and strategies for community engagement come in. One of my favorite tidbits that I think is really easy to remember, and one thing for you to take away today, is to avoid DAD. Avoid DAD. DAD stands for decide, announce, and defend. So I'm sure many of us, growing up had a dad or father figure or parental figure that told you that you could not go out or you cannot take the car out, right? It's frustrating, you're upset. It did not feel good to have that decision made for you. And while this is kind of a funny analogy and acronym, this is all too common in government and other institutions. We often make our own decisions internally, announce that decision, and often prepare to defend against various stakeholders and community residents. So we want to avoid DAD. We want to be sure we're respecting people's experiences, knowledge, and history. And while we are often the authorities on various topics like regulations, policy, science, budgets, and funding, we are not the authorities of the communities itself or its residents, and both are critical. This is the spectrum of community engagement to ownership. There's a very helpful tool that was developed by Rosa Gonzalez of Facilitating Power and draws upon content from various public participation tools. Some of you may be aware of the International Association of Public Participation. They have a tool as well. This is very similar to that tool, but this one is my go-to in framing community engagement and public participation. This is also available online, so no worries if you don't catch everything that I go over today. The spectrum is really designed to help organizations do a few things. Acknowledge marginalization as the status quo practice of current systems that have been historically designed to exclude certain populations, namely low-income communities and communities of colors and others. This understanding is important because if considered efforts are not made down to break down existing barriers to participate, then by default, marginalization occurs. So the status quo historically has been marginalization, and if we don't break down that status quo or scrutinize it, then we are perpetuating barriers and allowing marginalization to occur. It really asserts a clear vision for you and your organization, right? It articulates a developmental process for rebuilding your programs and our local democracies, and emphasizes that there requires a significant investment in the capacity to participate. And also it allows you to assess your own community participation efforts and goals. This document is available online again, and it has some guidance, which I won't go over, on facilitating conversations and activities in your own organization to help you use the spectrum. Some of the things you can use the spectrum, this tool for, is for planning and goal setting. You can apply it to policy development and use it for assessing projects and programs. And there's more details of how to do that and some user-friendly facilitation toolkits in this document. All right, how am I doing on time? Where am I at, Marianne or Victoria?
I think we can give you about maybe 5 more minutes.
All right, I'm gonna run through this. And again, it's all available. I'm just giving you an overview. So an overview of the spectrum. On top, you see here in this kind of orange color, a stance towards community row, which includes things like ignore, consult, collaborate. And under these are messages that communities receive when agencies do this, these all under these kinds of these areas. So we're going to emphasize 3 different stances in spectrum, namely ignore, consult, and collaborate. So when an agency or department or jurisdiction takes a stance that ignores community, the message to community is your voice, needs, and interests do not matter. Engagement and outreach activities look like closed door meetings, misinformation, and typically 100% of resources are on the administrative end, with little to none going to engagement and outreach efforts. In terms of consult and consultation, when an agency takes this stance, the message to the community is, we care what you think. Activities include public comment, focus groups, community forums, and surveys. And you start to see a little bit of a shift in resource allocation. And in general, both in public and private sector, most organizations generally lie under consult as their kind of go-to for community engagement. And then we have collaborate as another example. The message to community here is your leadership and expertise are critical to how we address this issue. And activities look like memorandums of understanding with CBOs, community organizing, resident advisory committees, open planning forums where you're actually live polling residents, right? And again, going back to the overall spectrum. And again, this is actually, even this overall spectrum is a snapshot, is a modified version of the broader spectrum. So again, these are all build off each other, right? They're developmental. This is not a binary where, you know, there's one extreme and the other. Different parts of your organization or programs could be in different stages, right? Most organizations are not monolithic. So different people and different programs under an office in a department or agency or jurisdiction are in different levels. And to really to paraphrase the authors of this message of the spectrum, understanding these different stages allows us to recognize where we are at and set goals for where we want to go together. And by we, I mean the governing agency or jurisdiction and the community. And if you look at this final developmental stage here in purple, defer to, right? This is hard. And it's often an aspirational goal to get to, but it is possible. And after all, we are talking about combating systemic racism and dismantling white supremacy. So we need to think big, and also think big in terms of our community engagement strategies. This is just an example of different pathways for community engagement, different things that can encompass where you can apply community engagement strategies and practices in, not just you know, technical assistance, is a number of things. And if there's one thing I can tell you, when you start working on community engagement, it's always a good idea to work with impacted residents or community members whenever possible. And if you can, please do so. Please, please, please compensate them for their time. Their time and expertise has value. This can also apply to smaller nonprofits and CBOs. I know it takes some event planning, but I know we can all spare some nominal funds in our budgets on this kind of work. It's usually not a lot, but it goes a long way in showing goodwill and effort in your commitment to community engagement. So a couple takeaways. Community engagement is necessary to advance racial equity and equity at large. It is a spectrum and aims to empower, and can be applied to a variety of activities. I wanted to offer a couple of really more recent resources and resource compilations, namely the Emergency Broadband Benefit by the FCC, $50 a month towards broadband service for eligible households, and $75 per month for households on tribal lands. The future is digital engagement. It's important that we support people, not just expect them to participate online, but give them the means to. So sharing this federal benefit as it currently exists would be helpful. I just wanted to do a plug for that. And then also CDPH, we have published a COVID-19 health equity playbook that's supporting local communities and local health departments to ensure that we respond equitably and build an equitable recovery. It collects a variety of resources and best practices from across the state and country to support communities on an ongoing basis, and it is regularly updated. There's a section on community engagement with tons of resources. I just scratched the surface right now. There's also a transportation and physical access mobility section, and we would love your input on. So if you have time after this webinar, check it out, look at that section. Let us know if we're missing anything. Let us know if you like anything. You may see something from your jurisdiction. We found a lot of things all over the state. And just closing with a couple of my favorite quotes about the work we're doing here by some historical figures and movement builders that I look to and the work that I do in government. Thank you. Should I stop
so
sharing?
Much. Yes, thank you, Lasser. We can put up the next presentation. Just as a reminder, we are accepting questions in the chat box. Not seeing any at this point, and to in consideration of time, Lasser, why don't we hold off on any questions right now, and we'll have Kendi present, and then if anyone has questions amongst our participants for Lasser or Kendi, you can just make sure that you're putting those in the chat, and we'll address those at the end of Kendi's presentation. Thank you so much, Lasser. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Kendi with this introduction. Kendi Vance is the Caltrans District 2 Native American Liaison, as well as a member of the district's awesome active transportation program team. So today she's going to speak to her work and working with tribal governments. Kendi, are you?
Yeah. Hi, Victoria. Yep.
Right.
Hi,
Okay.
Victoria.
Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to speak on this, and welcome to all the people on the workshop. So again, just like Victoria said, my name is Kendi Vance. I am the Caltrans District 2 Native American Liaison, and today I'm going to be talking about working with tribal governments and kind of best management practices in my experience, not just in seeking equitable engagement, but particularly with trying to implement complete streets type projects. And although we're focused more on NI, particularly, we all know that plans lead to projects. And that's how important it is to be collaborative throughout the whole process. So the next slide, please. Okay. There we go. Oh, see, I have mine pulled up and not the screen. Advance the slide. So I really feel like it would be a disservice if I did not spend a little bit of time on this before I jump into the actual work about it. Establishing meaningful relationships with your tribal partners is absolutely critical. It's so important to learn which tribes are in your area. It's important to dig into their history and read about their constitutions, their culture, their language, and how they do business. And the reason why I reference how they do business is because historically, I think a lot of us, especially agency-driven folks, department-driven folks, we work in a very contemporary business model where we need to do business with somebody else or somebody external to our organization. And while we're doing business, we can decide then to create relationships or foster relationships. And some tribes do work like that. But in my experience, a lot of the tribes I work with, I think, work in a more traditional business model where they really would prefer to build and foster relationships, establish trust, establish meaningful relationships, and then start to do business. So I think it's a really good takeaway for folks to understand the importance of patience and the importance of perseverance, and also to take cues. You know, your tribes, the tribes in the area that you're in or that you're working with, you know, they'll let you know where their interest level is, but you know, don't give up, but also be respectful too. You know, work with others on work with others on their journey and successfully establishing relationships with our tribes. Tribes are our partners. They are not obstacles. They are not roadblocks to you or your agency. And with appropriate and meaningful consultation, most tribes are willing to engage and find solutions that work for all. I also think it's important to understand that do not recognize that a lack of response from the tribes in your area does not always constitute a lack of interest or a lack of a desire to engage. They are being pulled on by so many agencies and countless other departments, and I imagine that this is going to see a huge increase in the next few years, if not decades, as we continue to try and achieve social equity and be more inclusive and prioritizing of our historically underserved communities. Remain vigilant, be patient, be authentic. Do not be a checkbox agency. I cannot stress that enough, and Lazaro said it earlier as well, and I was so happy to hear him say that. Work with our tribal partners, work with our disadvantaged communities and our underserved communities because it's the right thing to do, not because you have to check a box in order to achieve it. Authenticity matters. Do not confuse notification for consultation. I can't tell you how many times I have had to run interference for places where consultation was claimed to have been had, and all that was actually happened was a letter was sent. Notification is not consultation. And also, whatever you do, let the tribes define what and when consultation is occurring. You don't define that, they do. You can have a government-to-government trust status relationship, and you can have government-to-government responsibilities to consult, but tribes will and are the best to speak on behalf of how their structure works, how their council works, how their decision-making processes work. They can define when consultation is occurring, and also when it is over. It is an ongoing process. So through years and years of collaboration, this is how you get to this point. So please don't expect anything to happen overnight. And just like Lazaro said, don't come into these communities and tell them what you're intending or planning to do and call it consultation or collaboration. Truly, truly work with them throughout the planning process to ensure everybody's needs are being heard. Next slide. Okay, I had to put this slide up here because anytime I'm asked to speak on effective engagement with tribes, I always put this up here. Assume that you are on tribal ancestral land if you are in the state of California, because you are. Currently, there are 109 federally recognized tribes in California, and I think it's important for you to know that's a fifth of all of the tribes in the nation. This state houses 20%. Tribal governments hold inherent power of limited sovereignty, and in addition, California is home to the largest Native American population in the country, including non-federally recognized tribes and state recognized tribes. Next slide. Just very quickly, the overlap. I want folks to be able to see that previous map as well as this one to see where our MPOs and RTPAs as well as the 12 Caltrans districts are on here. This matters as interagency coordination and collaboration is absolutely mission critical to implementation of projects. Rights of way, owner operator issues, responsible agencies, jurisdictional reasons, maintenance. Oh, I could go on and on forever about all of the reasons why interagency coordination is so critical. Next slide. In my experience working with our tribal partners, I think being able to identify what and where the obstacles are is crucial to getting project implementation. And then how can I help eliminate them or work around them? And I think one of the most critical obstacles is acquiring funding to develop plans. Active transportation plans, bicycle plans, safe routes to school plans, safety plans, on and on and on. Many times agencies or state departments have access or they manage these types of grant programs. I try to ensure that all the tribes in my area receive every single grant opportunity, NOFA and other funding opportunities that can help create the plan. And then I try to help contribute to the application process. Can your agency or department provide technical assistance? Can you partner? Can you join forces to increase your competitiveness? The second bullet is extremely important. Sovereignty. I like to say to people, know more than just how to spell it. Understand that it is inherent, which means it cannot nor should it be asked to be given up, limited, or modified. Although many, many, many times in order to do business with tribes, there is limited waivers of sovereign immunity that are embedded into contract language and into agreements. This is something that is a huge, huge issue that we don't necessarily have solutions to, but we are working in the right direction, I think, to try to find a place where we can continue to do business with tribes without having to ask them to give it up. The literal definition, or limit it in any way, the literal definition of inherent means existing in someone or something as a permanent and inseparable element. So when we ask them to limit it, or we ask them to give it up, and they react in a way that is potentially impacting to them, to their tribal structure, to their organization, understand why. When you create relationships of substance, you can create partnerships of progress. What can my department do to help break down these barriers? And if we cannot break through them, can we circumvent them? Be innovative, not only in procedure, but in mindset. Be receptive to trying new things that have never been done before. And please, please adopt my philosophy of reject the notion that setting precedents is always a risk, because it is not. And when you start asking hard questions and you start trying to push things uphill, you will get met with no after no after no. And you will be met with all kinds of folks that are like, oh, well, if we do that, oh, what if we set precedent? Make sure to remind them that that's not always a bad thing. And what if it's the right thing to do? Why can't we set precedent when it is the right thing to do? Next slide. Also, identifying the needs of their community. Projects such as the Happy Camp Complete Streets project, which I'll talk about in a second, do not just happen overnight. It is the culmination of over a decade of work and perseverance, dedication, commitment, and trust. And just in case you're curious, the answers to the top two questions: are there unmet needs in these tribal communities related to complete streets, and have they historically been unprioritized? The answer is always an astounding yes. You do not have to think about it. It is a yes. And you can also apply that to most disadvantaged and disenfranchised and historically underserved communities, especially people of color in our minority groups. So when environmental justice is done right, you can ensure that low-income and minority communities receive equitable distribution of the benefits of transportation activities without suffering disproportionate adverse impacts. This is so, so important and critical when we are talking about complete streets infrastructure, because a lot of these folks maybe do not have driver's licenses or vehicles or homes or access to transit. They may need to walk, bike, or roll, and they must have safe infrastructure to access goods, services, schools, stores, medical, recreation, etc. When working with tribes, understand as deeply as you possibly can that land use, economic goals, environmental issues, and cultural concerns are all interconnected, and they impact and affect the others. You may be talking to them about one thing, and they may be seeing it with a completely different broad brush, and they might have concerns that were not even on your radar. Listen to them, hear them, validate and work with them to address these concerns. And last but not least, get these needs identified in a plan and get them prioritized and get them embedded in as many of them as you can, and then identify funding sources. All of them, every funding source that could possibly be available to the tribes, identify them. Find out, are tribes directly eligible, or do they need a co-sponsor? If they are not directly eligible, go ahead and add that to your list of barriers in achieving equitable engagement. Next slide. I have 2 minutes, Victoria. I have a timer going. Am I okay on time?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, great. So, I mean, come on. Is this not the sweetest logo you've ever seen, ever? We spent a lot of time on this logo, and we're super proud of it. And I have to say, congratulations to the Karuk tribe for their successful Cycle 5 ATP application, awarded for $9.9 million with a total project cost of $12.2, with funding contributions from the tribe and Caltrans District 2 minor program. I absolutely love this tribe. I love working with them, and I am so very proud of the relationship that my district and department has built with them. And this project is an absolute direct reflection of how meaningful partnerships and relationships can build projects even when everything seems stacked against you. And just really quickly, I think that for the purposes of this equity and equitable engagement, I'm just going to read a small paragraph that was excerpted from their application. And it says this: with all the technical reasons why certain elements are selected, the project team has never lost sight of the importance of preserving and maintaining the integrity and spirit of the community of Happy Camp. The Hope for Happy Camp community group, along with numerous residents, stated the importance of ensuring that this project isn't, and I quote, just some cookie cutter project you'd find in any town USA. It is important to us that the consideration and the existing character and distinctive presence that this town already radiates is maintained. Happy Camp is special. It is unique. We want the traveling public to know that when they enter, to know that our town is different. We take pride in it. They do have a 20-foot Bigfoot statue as you enter that town, and it is quite the tourist attraction. And so, of course, we are also on the Bigfoot Scenic Byway out here, which is why you see Bigfoot in the logo. So this is what equitable engagement can do. This is the culmination of successful, dedicated, equitable engagement. Next slide. The only reason why I put this on here is so that folks who are watching and who are listening can understand that this is the team. This is the Happy Camp Complete Streets Project Technical Advisory Committee that has been in the works for a decade. Ongoing outreach, technical advisory committee and stakeholder meetings, multiple opportunities for this disadvantaged community to best identify their preferred alternative. There is in all caps, in all bold, flashing, because Caltrans and all other lead agencies tend to want to come in thinking they know what's best for the town. They have the engineering studies, they have the technical studies. They do not. We do not. The town knows what's best for them. The town knows where their unmet needs are, and the town knows how to solve them if you give them a seat at the table. So from 2011 to 2020, we had so many stakeholder and engagement meetings, and we'll continue to do this throughout the life of the project. And all of these included community members, students, parents, schools, business owners, various Karuk tribe departments, Siskiyou County, state agencies, local law enforcement, Happy Camp Ambulance Service, Happy Camp community groups, recreation groups, and residents living along the State Route 96 corridor. The Karuk tribe's application had 15 letters of support, and their community and business outreach letter of support was signed by 32 businesses. It's incredible. It really is incredible. I'm so proud of them. Next slide. And as I was mentioning before, if you can get them identified in plans, because particularly talking about non-infrastructure and talking about trying to create a vision, this project was identified and prioritized in all 7 of these plans. And the one place that I want to point out for you is number 7. In cycles 1 and 2 of the Active Transportation Program grant cycle, there was no way to tell a story about the safety deficiencies without safety data. If you did not have dots on a map, if you did not have a heat index, if you did not have a story to tell with data, you will never, ever, ever going to get funded for this. It's a 35-point question, and if you didn't have it, you were not going to get it. So when the tribe wanted to submit for cycle 2, we told them, let's hold off on that. We already know this isn't going to work. We're lacking data. So when I found out there were tribal safety assessments that were going to be given by UC Berkeley and SafeTrack, I immediately called the director of transportation at the Karuk tribe. I said, hey, I think this is an apple for us. Will you go after this? Will you submit for this? And she did. And that tribal transportation safety assessment was everything for us, everything for the tribe to be competitive in this program and to score a 91 on this, which was the cut for small urban and rural. Had they missed one more point, I wouldn't be here talking to you about this successful application. And I would also like to end on, I'm not calling this project successful yet. The application was successful. A lot of the things that went into it are successful, but we still have some hurdles and we still have some barriers to plow through. And we're working on that with the CTC headquarters and with my district and with the tribe. And I will call this project a success when I see the first kid ride in that bike lane from his house to his school safely. And that's what I'm hoping for. So that you go ahead and jump to the next slide. I think that's my thank you slide. Yeah. Yeah, there's my contact information, my name and number, and please don't hesitate if you have any questions to reach out or whatnot. And I'll go ahead and throw some resources into the chat here, because I think a lot of people on this call or on this workshop might not be aware of the Tribal Advisor to the Governor's webpage. It is amazing, absolutely fantastic, chock full of contact information and resources, as well as the Native American Heritage Commission. And I'll throw those in the chat for folks that might want to investigate further. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kendi. That was wonderful. And thank you. Thank you. I will also say, if anyone is hoping to ask a question of Kendi right now, or Lazaro from his earlier presentation, I encourage you to type in your questions into the chat box. I am not seeing any questions, so if you're asking questions specifically of, say, Marianne as the host, if you could re-ask your question to all attendees, that will give us the ability to read and respond to those questions. Kendi, you did mention you're going to put in some links into the chat, so you're welcome to do that with the time that you have left with us today. But thank you so much. Thank you so very much. And in the interest of time, since we have no questions right now, I'm going to move us forward with our next speaker. So Edgar, you're going to be up next. And as Marianne moves the slides over, I'll give Edgar's introduction. So Edgar Garibay is the Community Relations Manager at Tuolumne River Trust. He also serves as the Central Valley's Programs Director for the Tuolumne River Trust. We've asked him here today, given his extensive experience working with residents in the underserved Riverside community, which with a primary focus in Modesto's California's airport neighborhood. So his presentation today is on reaching local communities. So Edgar.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Okay, and I believe Marianne is actually going to give you the ability to pull up your own slides and advance them yourself.
Yeah, can you see that?
I can see it. Great.
Okay,
Perfect.
all right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to participate. Thank you for Lazaro for his great presentation, as well as Kendi. Great to see the communities, and we're reaching towards those equities. So I really thank Marianne and Victoria as well. So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Edgar Garibay. I'm the Central Valley Program Coordinator for the Tuolumne River Trust. As I speak about the work that we've done, I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro. I'm just having a little bit of issues right here. 1 second, sorry. So what we're just going to be speaking about today in Modesto Central Valley here about the Tuolumne River, the communities, specifically the airport neighborhood, some of the challenges and opportunities and successes that we have moving forward, and then some of the community efforts that we've done during and continue to do during the pandemic. So just to give you a brief overview and acknowledging the lands that we are in the watersheds, this is the land of the Miwoks and the Yokuts. This is also part of the Tuolumne River Watershed. And as in reference to Caltrans, we're part of District 10. So our organization expands the whole 162 miles of the Tuolumne River from our upper watershed office in Sonora to a lot of the work that we do here in the community in Modesto and the lower river, and then also in San Francisco, where 2.5 million people get their water from the Tuolumne. As you can see up on the top near some of the areas where they have dams, Hetch Hetchy is the place where San Francisco communities get their water as well. As we move into the lower river and the Riverside communities, some of the data from Cal EnviroScreen as far as the identification of ethnic and racial background, where about 71% of the communities identify as Hispanic, Latinx, than white and such. So the three communities that are near the river, you see, this is the Tuolumne River Regional Park, which is about 7 miles of there's some gaps in between, but basically of unimpeded access in these communities. And a majority, as you could see from the next slide with Cal EnviroScreen, which takes a lot of different factors into consideration. There, it's all red. So there's 6 census tracts that are within the top 5%, and then 3 within the top 15%, according to Cal EnviroScreen. So it gives you a glimpse or an eyes view, and about 20% of Modesto's population live within these communities. So that gives you an avenue to the different issues that come about with this community. And I think I'm not going to do a lot of repeating, but I think Candy and Lázaro have spoken about a lot of the work that needs to be done, that needs to be addressed, and how we go about doing the work. As organizations or as public agencies, we're there to be a support to the community, and how we could inspire, how we can be inspired by the work that they do in the daily lives and the daily struggles or different challenges that they face. As far as the airport neighborhood in and of itself, I will just give a brief overview in terms of the challenges and successes and still continuing opportunities that we have. And then I will, in the next slide, you'll see a map of the community. There's a split jurisdiction and a state highway. So there's 3 different jurisdictions, depending on the issues that come up, that come together, whether it's the city of Modesto, Stanislaus County, Caltrans to some extent as well, similar with public services, etc., housing affordability, safety and access to these public or community spaces, illegal dumping, homelessness, and stray animals. As far as some of the successes, and again, there's a lot of opportunities, so the work is never done. It's still continuing. Have been to work successfully in somewhere, again, Candy mentioned it, with Safe Trek with UC Berkeley Safe Trek. They're a great resource. Safe routes to school, safe routes to parks. We've worked with California Walks, with the Safe Routes Partnership. And so it's led to the development of some of these programs that parents participate, as well as infrastructure improvements, sewer, sidewalks that will be coming in, and then addressing environmental justice issues through public spaces, such as the general plan. So advocating for these public spaces in local and regional planning processes, such as the upcoming Modesto General Plan update. I also do want to mention, similar to that, the community was awarded, it was I believe a $5 million project in the active transportation round 4 as well. So it's very challenging in many communities, smaller communities as well as communities in the Central Valley. It's really hard project, really hard to get these kinds of projects. So it was really good to have that support that will be in construction in the next year or so. So here's a quick overview of the community. You see the parks are in green. The water system or the watershed is in blue. You have a tributary or that joins, is called Dry Creek. It's mainly ag runoff, but you have a lot of industrial areas. You have a lot of different jurisdictions and again, industrial uses around it. So the airport neighborhood is one of the top, it's in the top 400 census tracts in the state, according to Cal EnviroScreen. So here's what I'll say as far as we have two different projects going on in two different communities. In the community that we're currently working in, we have key strategic groups, and so if those in built relationship, it's different in each community. I would say that for us, what's been really helpful has been that in both communities that we're working in, there is a family resource center, and so that really helps to be able to outreach and engage students at the elementary school level, as well as their parents, because they are always participating or have a sense of getting their kids to and from school. We've also developed some community initiatives through the Healthy Start or Family Resource Center. There are a parent cafe. So that's where we utilize opportunities to engage with monolingual Spanish speaking parents. Our staff is bilingual. There's 2 of us here in our Central Valley office. And so that's how we're able to engage. From that arose the need to talk about community issues, because at the schools, obviously the politics is really hard to relate to that. So us as an organization developing what's called the charlas comunitarias, or the community chats, gives the community an opportunity to really highlight and put forth goals for the next year. In addition to that, the last part is we developed co-jointly with the Family Resource Center what's called the Airport Neighborhood Collaborative that meets monthly and provides a platform to the community, as well as community partners, whether it's businesses, public agencies, et cetera, that meets monthly. And so we are addressing both school and community issues in that way. We're looking to dovetail the same program in another community, West Modesto, where we're developing a parks project. And during the pandemic, we've done a lot of outreach, and it's been challenged because it is a new community. So some of these key strategies and community partner support are really being implemented in both ways in both communities. Although the majority of the time I'll be talking about the airport neighborhood, but this is really ways that are opportunities for parents and in these communities to be involved. Often they've been forgotten in many ways, and feel that in terms of accessing local spaces. You don't see that in other parks and other neighborhoods within the community, but you see those challenges there. So those are the questions that are often asked. And so the idea is to work with our local partners, our local agencies, and get to those points where we're addressing some of those issues with the community and having ownership from the community through programs or through engagement opportunities that give them that opportunity to voice their concerns, such as the upcoming general plan process or the development of these parks of these regional parks, basically. So I'll just be very brief in terms of what we were able to do. In 2020, this past year, we were able to get a small grant from the Safe Routes Partnership to integrate safe routes to parks in the process. We had previously worked with them and California Walks for a safe routes to schools. So with that, we engaged with a number of community leaders, and then obviously the pandemic hit. So these are the partners that have worked with us along the way in different aspects. We normally would have more community partners at the table and more community residents, but again, due to the pandemic, this is what this team was able to do, and working towards that and transitioning from going to having either indoors. We've also facilitated trainings outdoors in the parks themselves and utilize those spaces to be able to have more participation from the community, to transitioning to a virtual world where many of the community members don't have prior knowledge. Access to internet can be scarce, and then also their time, that the ability to be able to go to a place where they know and trust, and not being able to because they need to make sure that their kids are logging on for distance learning. So what we did is we developed a short survey that discusses whether or not they were going to be able to participate. Do they have access to an electronic device, reliable internet, and then do they understand some of the knowledge that takes to implement, whether it's logging on to platforms like these, and how to utilize that because of the fact that what we were able to find through these results was that we outreached to 40 community members, only about 25% of them were participating throughout this process, and continue to participate. And we found that only half of them owned a tablet or a computer, and only about 20% of them had knowledge of how to use these applications, whether it was on their computer or their phone. Phone was the preferred way to do that. And so what we did over a 3-month period from March 2020 to about June 2020, we met twice a week to develop those skills with those residents. And what the community members learned were a variety of different tools. So we would present with the phone so that they could follow along, and recorded some of these, and they were able to access them. And if not, we could always go back and teach those basics, but how to write an email, utilize the search engine, how to navigate their phone as far as the settings, connecting to video conferences. We also had different opportunities as far as utilizing Google programs and then flyers for activities and events. As part of this Safe Routes to Park framework, calls for the way that the community could participate in this process. So we're developing a community report in relation to the river park in the community and what we could do to continue those efforts to accessing these open spaces. So throughout the whole process, we made sure that we went over document sheets, slides, how to create a survey using Google Forms, how to utilize Google Maps. So we went through a whole different set of trainings and meeting twice a week, and thereafter meeting every 2 weeks like we would normally do it while we were in person. So these are different virtual community meetings. To your right is our partner, a community partner with Catholic Charities. To the left is myself, as far as utilizing some of these tools and getting them out to the community. And we also, if they needed to have these presentations, we would also drive through and provide that to them. So basically what it came down, and we're in the process of finishing this. We have the draft, but we're working with community, and it's an ongoing process, so it's never going to end. And so those were the goals that were developed as a way to implement these Safe Routes to Park action plan. These are the goals that you could see: improvement, safety, and increasing access, having more activities, and looking at other opportunities to connect to that park. So part of the project that was an ATP Cycle 4 that I had mentioned earlier is going to have a Class 1 bike lane to connect down to the river park, but there's still other projects that the community would like to do. And one of the things that we've been ongoing right now is we're actually going to be installing the first park sign in the community, the first bilingual park sign in this community. So that's one of the easier, lower hanging fruits that we're working. So from design to from concept to design is what we're basically doing, and we're going to be looking to install this in June as we continue to make improvements in this. So in terms of some challenges, obviously I think I've named them all, but basically it's just a balancing act for the parents. Participation was decreased, as well as the community stakeholders, due to reassignment and budget cuts due to the pandemic. And we had newly elected officials in November, so that needs to have those conversations again. And what I failed to mention previously was that these park systems, this park system, the Tuolumne River Regional Parks, is a joint powers authority with 3 jurisdictions: the city of Modesto, Stanislaus County, and the city of Ceres. So with these newly elected officials, it's time to re-engage, and we're looking at having more dialogues within the community and looking at ways to implement the Safe Routes to Park, some of the goals and activities that we have in there. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My phone number as well as my email, and can speak to you more in detail in ways that we've been able to coordinate and collaborate with our public agencies and have that symbiotic relationship with both the community and the public agencies that are in place. Thank you, Marianne.
Edgar, thank you so much. That was wonderful. We really appreciate you sharing all of your work. I'm looking at the chat box and wondering if we have any questions from our participants. And at this point, we will take any questions from any of the participants. And I'm going to ask maybe Marianne to just chat with me privately to see if there's an issue with our comment section, or if maybe there's they might be going to a different box, but I'm not seeing anything. But in the interest of time, maybe what we can do is pull up Kieran's presentation. We do have quite a dense, list of presenters today. All have been wonderful, and I think we're doing a good job kind of making time and space for the presenters. We also wanted to make sure there's time and space for any questions, but we're not seeing any. So on that note, thank you again, Edgar. And I'll, Kieran, let me just do an audio check.
Hi, I'm here.
Great. Okay, so now we have Kieran Parmar, who is an associate transportation planner with the California Transportation Commission, and she's going to speak to the CTC's upcoming Equity Roundtable listening sessions. So on that note, Kieran, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kieran. I currently work on the planning team at the California Transportation Commission for the past 6 months. And I have been focusing on equity and public engagement in transportation planning activities. Next slide, please. So just to give some quick updates, on January 27th, the CTC officially released its racial equity statement, which you can view online on the CTC website. Additionally, we will be announcing our new staff member, I believe in May, who has been brought on to focus specifically on furthering our equity and public engagement work. And during this presentation, I will be focusing specifically on an overview of our Equity Advisory Roundtable, also known as the Roundtable. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the California Transportation Commission's Equity Advisory Roundtable is to elevate diverse perspectives in the transportation process and enhance relationships with local, nonprofit, and advocacy partners. Roundtable members will collaborate with Commission staff, as well as staff from CalSTA and Caltrans, over a series of virtual meetings to inform staff recommendations to the Commission related to specific equity activities. The Roundtable will advise the Commission on topics, including but not limited to the following: feedback on public engagement best practices to inform the Commission's public meetings, feedback on the forthcoming community listening sessions that the Commission will hold in partnership with Caltrans and CalSTA, and then the development of a Equity Advisory Committee. So this work is intended to kick off in April, specifically April 21st, and conclude in early 2022. The Roundtable is envisioned as an interim effort that will be succeeded by the formation of a standing Equity Advisory Committee. Next slide. So at the August 2020 Commission meeting, the Commission directed CTC staff to invite Roundtable participants representing several membership areas and reflecting the geographic diversity of California. The Roundtable will bring together about 20 subject matter experts and practitioners throughout the state. The membership areas were developed in consultation with key stakeholders, and they include the categories that are listed on the screen above. And Roundtable members will attend public meetings of the Roundtable, and they will provide their honest perspectives on topics that are discussed. And at times, Roundtable members may challenge Commission staff or other attendees at the meeting to facilitate productive dialogue and meaningful change. Commission staff will organize, advertise, and facilitate the Roundtable meetings. In addition, Commission staff will be there to share any meeting notes with Roundtable members before posted publicly. We will work with Roundtable members to develop recommendations to the Commission. And if Commission staff and Roundtable members are not able to reach a consensus on recommendations, staff will be happy to share Roundtable member feedback with commissioners for their recommendation or for their consideration. And over the course of the Roundtable meetings, Commission staff will also coordinate with staff from CalSTA and Caltrans, who will attend Roundtable meetings and will present information relevant to their agency and interagency efforts. And we are planning to post a list of the members online soon, but if anyone is curious, I can send our list out. Next slide, please. So the Roundtable meetings will be broadcast live online to allow individuals who are not Roundtable members, such as other community-based organizations, government staff, and of course, members of the public to follow the Commission's progress and to provide input. The perspectives of the Roundtable members, however, will be centered in these meetings. And on the screen are the Roundtable meeting dates and times. And you can also follow the link to get the agenda for the upcoming April 21st Roundtable kickoff meeting. Next slide. And so that is it on the Equity Advisory Roundtable. And my name and my email and phone number is provided on the screen if you have any additional questions or just want some more information. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Karen, thank you so much for that presentation. And I just realized we might be having a significant technical issue. We've been uploading a lot of links to different materials and upcoming meetings that have been that are of interest, that all of our esteemed panelists are mentioning in their presentations, and we're of the mind right now that the attendees are not able to see all of the links. So on that note, I just want to let everyone know that we are going to be making sure that everyone has hyperlinks to all of the meetings and resources that have been discussed. They're going to be live within the presentations that our speakers have provided, but we'll also make sure that you get them in a follow-up email. Thank you so much, Karen. We'll make sure that everyone is aware of the upcoming meeting, and thank you for participating today. So we've got one final speaker, and we've got about 15 more minutes left of our meeting time. So Susie, we'll bring up your presentation, and I'm going to do an introduction for Susie as Miriam brings up her slide. That's wonderful. Okay, so Susie Rico Vasquez is a health educator with the Fresno County Department of Public Health, jointly leading the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program Education under the state's Nutrition Education and Obesity Prevention Program branch. And she leads the CDC's physical activity and nutrition program efforts that are local in Fresno County. Today, she's going to join us and speak about equitable engagement through the county SNAP Ed efforts. Take it away, Susie.
Thank you, Victoria. Can you hear me?
You sound great.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you can advance the slide, please. Thank you. I think it's important today to know our funders. As you mentioned in my intro, the foundation of most of our active transportation efforts in Fresno County stem from the California Department of Public Health funding. Fresno County Department of Public Health serves as a local SPAN and CalFresh Healthy Living program lead. Together, we leverage each of those funds to implement active transportation programs. But with our SPAN funds, it's allowed us here at the local health department to expand our efforts into one additional community. That community in my story today is Fowler, the city of Fowler. SPAN, in conjunction with other partner organizations, were able to successfully work with the leadership of the city of Fowler to increase the interest of our residents to expand active transportation opportunities, focusing on safe routes to school. This year, we're leveraging both funding streams to bring sustainable environmental changes. In 2020, after a successful community pedestrian bicycle safety training and virtual walk audit, I saw the need to bridge both of those funding sources. We here at the health department reviewed both work plans, and we leveraged our subcontractors' expertise, and we will be doing more. We continue to work with the community residents and the city based on their recommendations stemming from that final report to see incremental, focused, and approaches on bike and pedestrian signage and striping, and then work towards bike safety and ridership education events. It's really important to know the landscape in the community that you're working with, what large and small projects are going on, and leveraging those to build your own allies. In our case here in the city of Fowler, we met individually with each of those allies separately at various instances to really learn, plan, and keep moving engagement forward. Next slide. Now, I just want to say, I did not do this work alone. I am so grateful for the women that are in this, are pictured here on this slide. They teamed up with me, my counterpart Cindy Dean with the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, Lourdes Perez and Danielle Claybon from Public Health Advocates, and Monica Narisco from the Fresno Housing Authority. Okay, so in our story, Public Health Advocates was already working in the city on a few things, mostly a park equity project. They had already surveyed residents and applied for a park equity grant, and they were not funded. But from this work, it paved the way to create a new partnership between Public Health Advocates and the Department of Public Health, focusing around active transportation and safe routes to school. So building off of their previous engagement, Danielle and I chose the focal neighborhood of Magnolia Commons. It was convenient for both youth and adult residents living at the property and for the neighborhood, surrounding neighborhood, to participate in our activities. The property clubhouse welcomes all. It's trusted and it's a safe place for all to convene. Next slide. It's really important to know the residents in your community and get to actually know them individually. Today, I want to share how we did that community engagement at Magnolia Commons and the details of that. Just like Lazaro and Kindy and all the presenters before me, it's really important to get to know those residents and hear them. So here's how we did it. Magnolia Commons, so the key points I want to share with you today is we always went to them. We always met them where they were. We always made our engagement personalized, whether it was by telephone, text, or in person. We were extremely genuine in our efforts. We were helpful and open and honest. I was so transparent. I let our residents know that I really wanted to get to know my fellow neighbors. I am also a resident of Fowler, so it was a win-win situation for me. Trust was previously built by Public Health Advocates and the Department of Public Health tobacco team because they were doing work in the smoke-free parks and multi-unit housing in the community. Pre-COVID, we partnered with Magnolia Commons, a Fresno Housing Authority property site in Fowler, California. Monique was very instrumental and key in helping us to rally residents at the site. She was key in getting them to come out to our very first workshop. We met with her several times in person and over the phone, but reality is she was key to our efforts. It's really integral to listen to the resident coordinator and their vision of what resident engagement opportunities are available at the property. There were several opportunities for us to meet and greet the adult and youth residents. It just took a lot of coordination. Our strategy was to develop flyers in English and Spanish and actually do door-to-door knocking to invite residents out. Monique, the resident coordinator, let us make direct contact with those residents. And it was a perfect opportunity to really casually get to meet and greet each resident each time we went out. In those door knocking instances, we would share the flyer and we would ask if they would come out. We tracked and noted the addresses and units and which residents would be interested in joining us. In some cases, they even offered their name, their phone number, and asked us to text them a reminder of the meetings. We started to actually build we actually started to build our own contact list with keynotes for each family. Overall, we visited the complex about 6 times to inform and invite residents to our Safe Routes to School workshops. We provided part 1 and part 2 because we had limited time during coffee hours. But each time we knocked on doors, it was our opportunity to really get to know each of those residents. All of our meetings are bilingual, and it was super key to have 8 to 10 minutes prior to propose an introduction / icebreaker, and also develop a parking lot for concerns that come up as we share information on Safe Routes to School. So it's important to do this because each resident would state safety issues or challenges, and as we wrote them down, they knew that we were hearing their concerns and that we would follow up to address issues. And we did. We followed up with them individually. Engaging youth can be tricky. With youth, it was super imperative to work with the resident coordinator, which was Monique. She knew, and she has a list of names of families and their children, and would invite youth to come out. Her after-school programming was a robust program and very incentivized. But by the time we had implemented the youth yoga, which can you, next slide, please, I'm sorry. So by the time we implemented the youth yoga during the property after school program, we had a great relationship with at least 6 adult residents who also had children. At each instance of our Safe Routes to School workshops, we had sign-in sheets with basic names, unit numbers, and phone numbers that we could conduct direct community outreach with parents via the phone, text, or door-to-door. We encourage residents, both the resident and their children, to come out. So at the end of each workshop, we noted who we needed to follow up with and promised that we would follow up with them. So personal calls, text messages by us were helpful. General reminders and casual check-ins with residents helped us to get to know each resident over time. So once we felt we had the opportunity to hear the residents and what could be done in Fowler to encourage families to walk or bike and feel safe while doing so, our next step was submitting an application to CalWalks for the community pedestrian bicycle safety training. And this work was all done pre-COVID. Next slide. So March 2020 hit. Of course, when our community first applied for this training, we had no way of knowing that a global pandemic was about to change the way we engaged the community. We did recognize early on that there was other more pressing priorities like public health, housing, financial stability, employment, and education. But our goal remained the same. We wanted to improve walking and biking in Fowler, and the planning committee ultimately postponed the audit from April 2020 to June 2020. It took us about 3 to 5 months to really do the community engagement and build to the point we where we had solid relationships with residents and youth. But at the time when COVID hit, it was a lot more difficult for us to community engage in person because of the COVID shelter-in-place orders. But because we had invested that time in getting to know our residents and youth and building strong relationships, we were able to have a very successful community pedestrian bicycle safety training and audit. We had 25 participants in total, and 13 of those were residents of Fowler. For this event, we actually showed up at the property a couple of times to work with our really engaged residents, to teach them how to use Zoom, to test it and try it on their phones, and follow up with them to be sure that they could log on to this Zoom meeting. It was the first ever CalWalks virtual walking and bike audit, and we thought 25 people was amazing. So we did a lot of other types of engagement to get other residents informed of this event. Fowler has key social media pages that are closed and only open to residents. We use the Nextdoor app and city websites, and we responded to each comment and concern on each one of those sites, whether it was social media or a website. Danielle and I really worked hard to meet and greet and meet with city council and commissioners and city staff before COVID hit. So when we emailed them to individually ask their participation at this virtual audit, they participated. Since then, the California Walks and UC Berkeley Safe Track prepared a final report with resident feedback and recommendations on active transportation in the city of Fowler. We've shared that report with our stakeholders in the city, and since then, we're continuing to work with the Public Works Director. Next slide, please. And we've been meeting to determine next steps, funding, and planning efforts to incrementally improve walking and biking. So ultimately, I'd like to acknowledge the people who are on this slide because without them, we couldn't have had that amazing walk audit. Next slide. Thank you. And I'm open for questions if there's any.
I'm muted.
Hello, everyone. Victoria, I can hear you fine, but I'll go ahead and talk about this slide.
Oh, okay,
Hi.
great. I wasn't sure. I actually don't have a button anymore for some reason.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry. Wow. We're having a few glitches. If you're on the call, thanks for all of you who have just stuck around. This has been a jam-packed presentation, so thank you so much. And I just want to talk about once we leave the meeting and I exit the meeting, you'll get this this kind of pop-up window about taking a survey. So I just want you to make sure and continue. The reason that is the survey is with an outside survey. It's called alchemy survey. So that's why you'll get this pop-up, but don't worry, just press continue and you'll have a survey about the webinar that you can respond to. Go ahead, Victoria.
Thanks, Marianne. Sorry, all of a sudden my screen started doing some wonky things. Yeah, if you can just advance to our next slide. I want to apologize fully. For some reason, we haven't been able to access any questions in the chat function, which is usually where we take questions. We've had, a wonderful hour and a half of presentations. And we know we hope we've sparked some good thinking and have provided you with some inspiration moving forward with your work. We will send out the slides and links to all of the information that was discussed, along with a link to the recording so that you can reference it in your for your future efforts. Thank you to everyone that has attended today. We really appreciate your participation, and we look forward to working with you in the future. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you to all of our speakers.